Welcome everyone to the 8th Biennial Kathleen A. Czar Symposium. The Czar Symposium is a regular series of events we hold here at UChicago Library that support the library profession, providing a space for academic librarians to learn and engage with important topics to the profession. We thank both, and I'm going to kick off with a long list of thank yous. To start with, we thank both the Kathleen and Howard Czar Science Library Fund and the Carrar Foundation for the generous donations that allow us to maintain the Czar Symposia. I would also like to thank the organising committee, chaired by Adrian Ho and Jennifer Hart, with Deb Warner, who manages the Czar Symposia on the committee as ex officio. They were joined by David Beetler, Taylor Ferris, and Caitlin Van Kampen. Could the organising committee please give everyone a wave so we know who it is putting in the hard work? Thank you. I would also like to thank all of our building services for the setup and the AV and helping today to go smoothly. Some practical points. The session is being recorded so that we can share it with colleagues who are not in the room today. Registrants will hear from us when those recordings are available, so if you missed anything, if you had to pop out of the room, you will be able to catch up later. The restrooms are just across the hall out here, and lunch will be served out there where the breakfast was served as well. On to the theme of today, which is artificial intelligence and the future of academic librarianship. As use of AI across the campus by all of our users, both academic, community, and student, increases, we need to understand the uses that people have for AI and the impact of AI on the content that we acquire, circulate, and preserve. We face ethical considerations around the training of AI models and the energy that that process consumes, and we face opportunities and uncertainties. I'm looking forward to hearing from our speakers today on all of these topics and the discussion on them that we will have together throughout the day. Thank you to all our speakers for bringing their expertise to us, both online and in the room. Finally, before we kick off, I'd also like to welcome our new AI librarian, Lois Wong, who is over there. Please give us a wave. Lois started with us on September 22nd and will be supporting our teaching and instruction for students and other services related to AI that we offer here from the Centre for Digital Scholarship, which is across on the other side of the building. That is all the welcome from me, and I will pass on to David. Thank you. Who am I passing on to? No one told me that.
Okay, so our first session is Generative AI and Scholarly Publishing, a publisher and librarian perspective. So for this session, we have two speakers. Anil Chandy will be joining us online in a moment. Anil has been Vice President of Humanities, Social Sciences, Books, and Focus Projects at Springer Nature since 2014, and Managing Director of Springer Nature Singapore since 2018. He leads an international editorial team publishing over 5,000 academic titles annually in all humanities, social sciences, economics, and business under Springer and Palgrave Macmillan imprints, as well as German language imprints of Springer Gabler, Springer VS, and JP Metzler. Apart from leading commissioning and publishing teams, Anil has also managed technology and data teams involved in workflow solutions for Springer Nature. Prior to joining Springer Nature, he worked at Sage, OUP, and Oxford University Publishing, and Deloitte Consulting. Scarlet Galvan will be providing the librarian perspective. Scarlet is the collection strategist librarian at the University of Chicago. In this role, she provides leadership and guidance for the growth and management of the library's collection, collaborating across the library to create and refine the library's collection strategy. Scarlet previously worked at Grand Valley State University as collection strategist librarian and strategic area lead for assessment and planning. She has also previously held roles at Brown University, SUNY Geneseo, and the Ohio State University Health Sciences Library.
I'm happy to be included on this panel alongside such distinguished colleagues and speakers. Of course, I come to this symposium from the publishing side, which I hope adds a complementary perspective to the discussion. So the topic given to me today to speak here was the future of generative AI in book publishing. I'm, of course, a VP at Springer Nature, looking after the humanities, social sciences books publishing primarily. I'm based in Singapore. And I will give you, in this session, a little bit of insight into how our book publishing is shaping up with Gen AI technologies now in use and for many functions. So, so I wanted to start with a little bit about how our team is located. We are a team of about 400 book editors across the globe. These are dedicated editors who commission and publish books. It does not include editors who work in journals or on Nature or colleagues, and these are colleagues who fully support the books program at Springer Nature. It also does not include our production support services or anyone who handles manuscript or technical support. So this means that these are all acquisition editors and, of course, people who work in developing content. It gives us a fairly international footprint. We also have about 80 colleagues in our offices in the United States, which still continues to be the largest market for us and from which we acquire and publish content. Of course, Asia Pacific and other areas have grown quite significantly in the last 5 to 10 years, but the US is still the leader here. This wide base allows us, of course, to have feet on the ground wherever science and scholarship is happening. 160 of these colleagues are in the program that I'm directly sort of responsible for, the Humanities Social Sciences Books program. And our editors extensively connect with communities, both at institutions and at conferences. So machine learning and natural language processing technologies have not been, have been sort of part of our product services and workflows for some years. So Springer Nature was already studying, experimenting, and deploying AI-related or algorithmic tools before the advent of LLMs. Our experiment with the first machine-generated book in 2019 did get some attention. This book was produced through a sort of cross-corpus summary of existing texts, organized into a coherent similarity-based sequence, what's called extractive summarization. In addition, we have also, of course, had many functions which are connected to, if not AI, of course, using technologies that underlie artificial intelligence or algorithmic technologies, such as journal recommenders, which you are familiar with. Algorithms suggest the most suitable journal for an author's manuscript, journal finder or recommenders, automatic classification of research content where machine-generated tags and organizes content for easier discoverability. There are reviewer recommenders, which tools that help editors identify appropriate peer reviewers based on expertise, plagiarism checks, of course, automated detection of overlap, and ensuring research integrity. There was always digital editing. We had editing tools that assisted with artificial intelligence-assisted editing to improve readability. And of course, automated translation services, about which I will speak a little bit more later in the presentation, which had already sort of started. And of course, content recommendation, personalized suggestions of related articles or books to readers and researchers. So these were all happening before this particular revolution came upon us in 2022, late 2022. And generative AIs, of course, LLMs have changed everything, not just for scientists and for publishers. It's changed the way humanity creates, accesses, and evaluates information as well. So our core philosophy for technology and Gen AI is guided by a sort of strong user centricity at Springer Nature. We are committed to harnessing the power of technology to further knowledge and discovery, but of course, every solution starts, in our view, with user needs. For simplicity, we have sort of 4 primary user bases that we have identified. The first one is, of course, institution, much like the University of Chicago Library. They need our content to be more accessible, easily discoverable, seamlessly integrated into their systems that is consumed by your patrons. Here, that of course directly plays into the research cycle. It improves usage, it improves citations, and most of our journals and books content, almost 90% of our journals content is already digitized, and all of our books content as well. Individuals form another subgroup or user base. They look for content without access barriers often, content that is free to use, to share, to apply to their personal research and learning. And I'm happy to say that almost 50% of all our primary research articles are now published open access as of 2024. And this, of course, receives much more usage, much more visibility. Industry is another important component. They require usability, content that is practical, that is reliable, and easy to apply to their real-world challenges. Our content gets downloaded several billion times over, and there is a steady increase in usage as well. And the last and one of our most important stakeholding groups, personally, at least for those coming from editorial, is our authors and editors. Their need is simplicity. We make it easier for them to publish and disseminate their work with us. And this has led to the use of technology has directly contributed to over 2 million article submissions in 2024 in our journals program, and led to us publishing more than 14,000 books. Together, these perspectives form the foundation of our user-centric approach in building AI-powered knowledge solutions as well. Researchers, of course, have already integrated several AI tools into the research lifecycle. I mean, generative AI is progressing, so is researcher use of those generative AI solutions and or products. It has the potential, of course, to transform every aspect of the research cycle. And it's important to note that researchers are not waiting for publishers to bring AI to them. At least that's the way we see it. They are already using AI tools across different stages of their research. This is a sort of life cycle diagram which broadly captures how that process occurs. For instance, at the top is search, supporting literature search and discovery, helping researchers find relevant articles faster and more accurately. This includes, of course, semantic search tools that go beyond sort of keyword matching. There is ideation. At the ideation stage, of course, AI can assist researchers in exploring new ideas, generating hypotheses, and scanning disciplines. These tools are often integrated directly into platforms such as research assistants or brainstorming apps. Analysis, of course, AI tools are used in coding and annotation, data analysis, and visualization. Also a major growth area where many prominent players have already appeared. And of course, where it touches publishing quite directly, communication and evaluation. We see AI helping with writing assistance, drafting, language polishing, where publishers, of course, are directly involved and interact most closely with researchers. And of course, even in evaluation, where there is peer review and experimental reproducibility, and ensuring research integrity. And so this is how broadly Gen AI technologies are playing out in the research life cycle. At Springer Nature, we have, of course, 5 principles which we developed for the use of AI or in the development of AI-related applications that governs all our processes, all our policies, and also shapes our decisions around what artificial intelligence mechanisms, etc., to use. It's fairly broad, but there is an executive board which basically looks into each and every AI-related development or product development idea or any kind of workflow improvement idea that is at Springer Nature. So it's always this executive board also includes sort of multiple internal stakeholders. There are different teams contributing to it, including editorial, including research integrity, technology, policy, ethics, legal, and of course our commercial side as well. So it helps us to understand what can be explored independently and stay aligned with Springer Nature's regulatory and data privacy standards, which we take extremely seriously in terms of how it shapes our approach to Gen AI tools and our publishing. Drilling down a little bit, broad areas that we are now seeing applications of Gen AI involving Springer Nature and its current work as well as the sort of immediate future. The first and foremost is our focus on expanding our range of titles that delve into how AI intersects with various academic disciplines. We're seeing a steady increase in growth of titles on the subject of artificial intelligence, primarily, as you can see in the chart, primarily coming from the computer science, intelligent technologies, and robotics and engineering fields. But other disciplines are contributing as well, quite significantly. So the second, of course, is advancements in generative AI offer numerous possibilities to improve and enhance our products. Our goal is to ensure that these enhancements directly improve the user and reader experience. This could manifest in sort of more refined search and discovery functionalities, or embedding into our content or into our platforms, additional features that users can use, and also sort of leveraging synoptical capabilities that AI LLMs have, for instance. Third is the application of AI in improving our author services. The application of AI in author services is a key area for us. Automated summaries, enhanced translation capabilities, we see as just sort of the beginning in the post-publication scenarios of making readers also aware of a book or an article, as well as generative AI is supposed to sort of make a difference. These tools can significantly reduce the time and effort required for authors to produce, localize, and publicize scholarships, thereby, of course, broadening their reach, their use, and their impact. Fourth is, of course, transforming our internal operational processes, and here we see a substantial support from AI-related tools, from enhancing screening processes, both in terms of time taken, identifying the right kind of expertise, to strengthening rights and integrity checks. It can help streamline many aspects of our workflow. Fifth, and perhaps most important, is that we commit to continued experimentation within AI within very strong ethical boundaries. Our approach to AI integration is very cautious, yet forward-looking, and strengthening research integrity now flows very much within the mainstream and the core area of how our tools are actually deployed. In all of these endeavors, and I've said this before, we take our cues from academia, from universities, normative circumstances that universities have helped develop, and the academic community's design and support provide the guidance for most of these initiatives. In terms of developing Essence principles on use of AI in book authorship specifically, we are now continually emphasizing and having this reflected in our guidelines for our editors, for our authors, and our creators. While we view AI as, of course, a tremendous opportunity for making and communicating science in an easier way, the LLM explosion has led to several questions, of course, being raised. And Nature was one of the first to come out with a statement that an LLM or ChatGPT cannot be credited as a co-author. That is the basis from which we started. Of course, we act within the principles that I mentioned before, but our guidelines nowadays carry quite clear pointers in terms of how AI authorship is treated. So there might be assistance from AI, Gen AI engines on AI assist or for copy editing, such as language polishing, etc., to human-generated text. Authorships, if the LLMs don't fulfill we again emphasize that it doesn't fulfill the authorship criteria. And of course, if you're using images, etc., which have been sort of I've seen used by AI or manipulation by AI, we do warn that it raises significant ethics and legal questions, and underscore that transparency is very key. We also say quite upfront that to declare and be transparent about such tools, document and acknowledges or introduction or preface of the manuscript. We are also looking into how this can actually be captured much more perhaps in the metadata, which makes it very transparent to both the user and the consumer, and so that we can guard against any kind of other issues which this may potentially sort of create. Little bit again on research integrity and our emphasis on it. We have deployed artificial intelligence in developing or detecting fraudulent actors. There are many cases, as you all I'm sure aware of, and fake science is also growing at a massive speed, which of course requires us publishers to be even more vigilant as we go forward. So one of the most critical applications of AI in Springer Nature is safeguarding research integrity. Now we use AI to detect plagiarism, duplicate submissions across publishers, or invalid or nonsensical text, and image manipulation. We've had some significant successes. In fact, combining in-house tools, we could stop like about 7,400 articles from a single paper mill. However, we have had some cases where it didn't work so well as well, although it went through some early generation models for screening. You might have seen this case where we had to have a book. In fact, it was on machine learning, branded as a textbook, retracted after a set of hallucinated citations were discovered. As unfortunate as it was the incident that allowed us to, in fact, and that is a very much an ongoing process, to build even more robustness into how we screen manuscripts, how we decide on our publications, and how we are learning from it. We have adapted, and that adaptation is proceeding at pace, strengthening our processes quite further. I have a couple of slides here which give you a little bit of a snapshot about how we are doing this currently. But this is the process that is very much aimed at. We are committed to strengthening it as we go forward. Our systems, as we speak, are getting more and more robust than ever. Of course, blending AI with human expertise to protect integrity, that is really the core of how we see this. I mentioned the screening, and currently for our book projects, we have there were some of these checks and screenings were already in place, but what we are doing is we are building additional structures and systemic screening into it, considering the number of projects which are coming, which are being submitted, which are potentially using artificial intelligence, perhaps in the right way as guidelined, or perhaps not so much. But it is our responsibility, we feel, as a publisher, that we look at it very carefully and try to catch any kind of issues very much at the start. So every manuscript submitted to Springer Nature now undergoes a series of integrity checks. They are built to protect our research quality. The first is, of course, against plagiarism. We run systematic checks for overlap with published literature to identify plagiarism and unattributed reuse. Then, of course, there's non-standard or tortured phrases for which screening is done. We also flag unusual phrasing. For this, we are using artificial intelligence tools, often a sign of text being manipulated or machine altered to disguise plagiarism. The other aspect of this is nonsense or gibberish text, which can appear sometimes. AI tools can produce fluent but meaningless text. Detectors highlight incoherent sentences or sections that don't align with scientific standards. And references, of course, hallucinated references. We are now checking references very, very closely to ensure that they're meaningful, connected to the topic, and not just random or inserted to gain citation metrics or any other kind of metric. Together, these checks, which are obviously we are looking at strengthening them as we go forward. Every manuscript processes through them and combining a sort of algorithmic detection as well as a human oversight in decision making. This layered approach should lead to better results as we move forward. In terms of, I put this in here, this is something that, of course, is nowadays talked about quite often in terms of AI-supported reviewing. But of course, I do not see a scenario, and neither is Springer Nature supporting such, that for us it's non-negotiable that a non-human in the loop solution is ever thought about for this. The decision making very, very clearly has to sit with the human peer reviewer and an acknowledged expert. However, models are becoming increasingly capable and already experimenting with this use in peer review. This poses problems if in doing so the confidentiality of the peer review process is breached. Many LLMs will use uploaded content as future training data, so that itself creates issues. We have to be vigilant against it. When we ask a human reviewer to review a paper, we are looking at their specific expertise and insight, and not for the reviewer to generate comments using a tool. Nevertheless, we believe that it will be a responsibility of publishers in future to provide reviewers with safer tools and reliable AI tools, considering the number of submissions and article screenings that you are dealing with. This will be a difficult balance to strike, but that one which we are committed to actually improving as we go forward. Having said that, a recent Nature survey, of course, underscored this by saying where researchers across the world found attitudes to AI-based reviews was not entirely positive. Decision-making by humans is a critical and important component of the expectation that scientists and scholars have about peer review. I will move to the last part of my talk and specifically focusing on our books content. We basically use three large meta use cases and their sort of real-world applications of Springer Nature in our books program. And the first one is text generation, which was part of the early sort of experimentation with machine-generated content. The book that you saw, the lithium-ion batteries one, was, yeah, in general is kind of similar to what text generation today can produce. We have very consciously moved away from this model because this is basically what leads to many issues, as we know. We've increasingly moved, and we have very clearly moved towards the other models that you see here, text conversion, which was also in use, of course, before LLM started, but there is obviously many capabilities that LLM and especially GPT-4 brings that supports this quite actively. They can convert text across styles and formats, summarize long to short, complex to simple, vice versa, and also, of course, support translations. These are all high-value applications of translation of our research, service roundups, transcription, and even looking at possibility of audio books being developed. While these are, of course, conversions are powerful, they still require human validation to ensure accuracy, especially in technical fields, which we completely follow. The last one is text interrogation, the third meta use case, where, of course, we had an experimental sort of hackathon where we used prompts first to develop a title. For instance, we had a credentialed expert, one of our existing authors, asking what kind of key recommendations, and there was a prompt ping-pong approach, which with the GPT model that allowed researcher or the author, in this case, to extract findings and recommendations and insights quickly, and then prompt it. And so there was a conversation which was again further refined using the expert's knowledge base, which meant that the human validation was there at each and every step, which led to the creation of a table of contents, and of course, in terms of looking at developing the text around actually a book. In this slide, of course, this is my concluding slide. I have some illustrations of illustrations of what we did. The first, of course, was the auto translations, which you see there, management of business process in US Indo-Pacific Command books. Usually these are offered to authors who already have written a manuscript with us, maybe in another language, or those who are not writing in their mother tongue. But we have become very, very judicious in terms of offering who actually is offered an auto translation. Primarily, Springer Nature publishes in English language and also in German language. So what we have discovered through some experiences is basically that often the author needs to be quite fluent in both languages to completely validate that work. And even a review might not actually be, the final qualitative validating point. The author himself or herself has to absolutely validate the content. So while the capability does exist in multiple languages, I think we can translate up to 25 languages or so. We have tested out in 4 or 5, including Chinese and Japanese. We will, going forward, stick only to English and German, where we have authors who can actually validate this quite conclusively. In addition, we have, of course, provided authors, those who have worked with us before, with the comprehensive set of relevant literature reviews when planning new editions. It's an AI-based solution, what we call a curated literature review, so that it solves kind of the information overload and identifies synergies. You put it together, data that they can then decide how best to use. And the AI use is very much clearly indicated, and the authors sort of work with us in a sort of experimental format for this. The last example is the one where we have text interrogation as an example, the hackathon that I mentioned earlier, where we do have an example of what we call the AI book designer. And this is an area where we are quite excited about it because it validates it at each and every step of the way, and that is how we see this currently developing further. So it's a very, very quick tour of what Springer Nature is currently doing with artificial intelligence and Gen AI in our book publishing. Yeah, that was my last slide, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. We're going to actually hear now from the library perspective. So let me stop the share. Take it away.
It feels odd playing to multiple rooms, so I wanted to be able to see my co-panelist. I think it's so rare that we get the chance, I think, to talk to someone who's exclusively in the acquisitions and publishing side, that I wanted to leave as much time possible for Q&A around a lot of those practices for folks. So if that's all right, I'm going to be doing that. I've got a couple of questions though that I wanted to start with to seed this. One is, I'm interested in particular in the principles that you mentioned around especially dignity and accountability. And those are the things that I am always thinking of about the use of AI tools, and especially about what governance from those principles looks like at an organization like Springer Nature. And I'm thinking in this moment of the tension between maybe the publishing and scholarly side of Springer Nature and the business arm of Springer Nature, and how a company this large can hold all of those tensions maybe successfully. I think libraries are fairly practiced at that, but I'm not sure always that corporate spaces are. And I think the dignity and accountability piece comes up especially with translation and copy editing work, because we know that those are some of the first, if we can point to any job that has been lost as a result of AI, it tends to be some of the things that you mentioned. So language translation, copy editing, graphic design, these kinds of things. And so I'm curious what feedback mechanisms are in place for your translators. If a model is not performing the way that it should, or if there are consistent issues, what does that conversation look like on your end of things? How do you go about protecting the dignity of people working with AI-generated stuff?
Yeah, Scarlet, thank you for that question. And maybe to start with, so in terms of minimizing harm and protecting dignity and accountability, this is basically worked into our framework. So the tension that you spoke about potentially between the publishing side and maybe the commercial side, I don't think that carries through so much. I mean, that is not something that we see, because I think every part of the organization to an extent recognizes that Gen AI is here. We have to certainly study it. We certainly have to adapt it into how we look at publishing, how we advise researchers, how we advise our own internal editorial colleagues, and we basically see that as a tool, first of all. And Springer Nature has been quite, quite deliberate about the fact that we support staff in terms of improving their knowledge about what these are. There are continuously sessions, trainings offered, etc., which tell you about the latest developments or what the organization itself is actually doing, how we are visible in the market, what are our products how are our products being talked about, how are our customers actually reporting back. And so our commercial colleagues are actually out in the market. We as editors are out at conferences where we discuss with many of the researchers. And so that is a very, very productive information ecosystem in which we are actually operating at this time, right? So, I mean, so we do get a lot of feedback around it. Regarding specific roles that you mentioned in terms of translations or in terms of how that, or copy editing, for instance. For example, copy editing as a function in academic publishing had moved away, at least from the super specialized part of copy editing itself, moved away to automated kind of screenings and different levels, etc. Quite some time ago, as part of sort of knowledge processes being creatively handled within sort of support teams. In terms of translations, translations were obviously earlier. What auto translations do is, to an extent at least, cut the intervening time, because academic translations, as we know, is very laborious, is very is carefully detailed and time consuming. So I don't think the particular emotion or the pulse behind what a translation should actually bring forth has vanished. In fact, the validation part is very much clear, and how we look at it is that, as I mentioned before, the authors themselves have to be, to an extent, quite clear about the language that they feel that their content is being translated into, which is why we are naturally sort of focusing on the two languages where we do publish, where we are quite sure that many of our authors are very comfortably bilingual in terms of communicating research. And the other aspect of it is that the feedback loop within our group itself, and here I'm talking specifically about the books business or wider within what we call ourselves as research publishing, which includes our journals part also, there is a constant feedback loop, because the technologists, the editors and others are working as part of one team. So there is a constant feedback loop where these days when you have an acquisition meeting, apart from the content, etc., which is being acquired, there is very often technologists and our colleagues who are handling these technologies in the room, because there is very specific requirements that we are asking them. How do you support strengthen integrity checks, for instance? What can we do in addition to that? Sometimes, even with human oversight, errors are happening. What is the technological support that you can actually give us that can help us navigate this quite clearly? Or if you, and we also say we can't look at a system where only technology is actually doing the screening. That is where editorial comes in, where technologists are developing these solutions. They're constantly asking editorial, what are the parameters that you are looking for in terms of looking at quality? Who are the people that you are talking to? Who are the peer reviewers that you are sending out this information out to? What are their feedback? So this feedback mechanism works quite effectively in my view, and that is how we are also learning as we go forward, and that is the kind of sort of a mechanism that we use to absorb what we see and use to learn, I would say.
Thank you. That's helpful in terms of just understanding. I know the last few weeks have been quite busy looking at those human checks and interventions because of what's happened with Retraction Watch, and which I think when we've talked a couple of times previously, we agree that showing up on a Retraction Watch is often a sign that the system works, that we've been able to find and identify and remove something. I want to, because I've been asked to offer a bit of perspective here, there isn't necessarily a question in this, but maybe something you can respond to. I'm doing that. I have more of a comment thing, and there should be a hook that drags you off stage when you do it. That I know that pretty recently, researchers from OpenAI and Georgia Tech have released a paper that essentially confirms hallucinations are a feature of large language models, and there are some interventions that we can make into it, that we can enter into them. Most of those interventions have to do with how we benchmark large language models and the conversations that we have around them. But I think what has happened, at least from the collection side of things, as a generalist, is that a number of content providers, not necessarily Springer Nature, and I'm speaking generally now, have injected AI tools into platforms, into the research tools that we use, and are kind of trading on a really high trust institution. We know consistently from Pew and from other mechanisms that libraries and librarians and library workers are some of the most high trust institutions and people and professions around. And so now we have this technology coming in and introducing doubt that is also sort of taking on the valence of the library, because when there's a hallucinated citation somewhere, it's not really a Springer nature problem often, unless it gets covered the way that this has. It's a library issue. It's just like when JSTOR is out. That's not a JSTOR problem, that's a library issue. And so I think where I look at the introduction of AI into platforms is what are we potentially losing in terms of that trust, and in terms of that we essentially have a number of for-profit companies borrowing on trust that they might not otherwise have in order to test a lot of tools that we know lack the certainty that we might want to introduce into the resources that we're providing. So I think that's where I'm sitting with it, but I appreciate the effort that I know you and others on your team are, working towards, and I know it's a moving target, to try and introduce human intervention in the right spots, where it's going to have the most meaningful impact. With that, I want to try to open this up to other questions. I know there are people who are much better at this than I am. So if there are questions from the floor, if someone can run around a microphone, that would be great.
Thank you very much, Anil, for a really interesting talk and look into how your publishing company and likely other publishing companies are navigating this particular moment. I appreciate that. Very enlightening. My question, I want to go back to the question of human reviewing, which is often presented as a check against a lot of the flaws of these systems that we're seeing. But I wanted to raise specifically the issue of automation bias, which impacts the efficacy of human reviewers. So humans in the loop become less efficient at being critical about machine-generated recommendations over time, because they tend to defer to and trust machine-generated answers. So we see this in high-stakes environments like the judicial system or social services benefits. How is your publisher handling those issues?
Yeah, I think this is an area where we are, we are also seeing these kind of developments happening. The one thing that we need to essentially tell our peer reviewers or have a discussion with them, and I think they discuss this with us as well, is that things are moving fast. But I think the value system that you have in terms of what constitutes good research and who is credentialing that as good research, and what are the values that you hope to uphold with publishing good research, these haven't changed. So what we are trying to tell our editors, our reviewers, etc., and they tell us as well, is that simply see these as tools. Now, we tend, because of, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that these technologies are shaping behavior. So what we try to tell them is that we have to, of course, implicitly still look at what are the key values for which publishers like ourselves exist, or what qualifies as good content. And those haven't changed. The principles of authorship haven't changed. The principles of what constitutes good, great content hasn't changed. That's the same that universities or us as publishers, or the knowledge ecosystem in general, what we see as informed research and high quality research, these haven't changed at all. As long as you follow all the necessary steps that are necessary in terms of disseminating this content. So it's an ongoing conversation, but I think we have to hold fast to the values that we have always acted with here. And I know this may sound a little bit general, but this is again an area where you have to reiterate and reestablish it, because the pull of technology is so much. All of us, for instance, are also under that. First of all, it gives us a lot of speed. That gives us convenience, and that again leads to a behavioral change, etc. But again, one has to go back and continually reiterate that the values that we are hoping to share and around our content, around its particular impact on our community, how it is likely to be read and worked on, these are not changing so fast, and so you have to hold fast to those values. I'm not sure if that entirely addresses your question, but it's a question that I have also been thinking about quite a lot. I do not have a really a good answer to it, but maybe there are analogies with other potential industry environments, or where high trust environments need to be built, need to be shaped, and need to be protected. And as stakeholders in that ecosystem, we all have to work together. And maybe there is learnings and principles that we can adopt from there, which can shape this in the future as well. So that's how I would see it. For now, simply put, we tell people or our reviewers, our stakeholders, treat it as a tool, not as your final decider, as much as possible.
Are there any other questions?
Hi, thanks for your talk. I'm curious about, we looked at your 5 principles and the things that you within your company are doing to try to create safe, usable, accessible, AI generated or AI assisted information. And what I'm curious about is what your corporation and what the publishing industry in general is doing to use the financial and corporate influence you have to affect global or national or any kind of policy that would standardize safety and information, because we are at this point we're just trusting institutions and companies to be good, which is scary. So
yeah, no, thank you for that, and I think it's a very significant one. Of course, in the overall knowledge ecosystem, or even if you take an economy, even if we look like a large publisher, we are actually just a publisher, right? I mean, and there are many players in this ecosystem who can guide those, or probably could guide those narratives, who have probably more influence with regulatory bodies or with governments. So as an individual organization, and maybe even speaking for our own industry bodies like the STM Association or COPE, there is a constant dialogue that happens. For instance, so even with, I'm part of the board of the copyright management organization in Singapore as well, and we are constantly trying to have a dialogue with the government here in terms of maintaining quite strong regulatory policies around the use and reuse of content and protecting creators' rights. And where technology actually is deployed, and for instance, there have been many conversations, and so we see that this is getting heard. I think there is a similar case also in Europe and other geographies, certainly in the US, where our academic affairs colleagues, for instance, who are out in the market, they continuously have conversations with policy planners or key leaders in scientific establishments and others in terms of shaping that conversation and looking at the implications of how this is developing as. So what I would say is that as publishers, we do we are very aware of the role that we have in terms of shepherding and stewarding some of the information. But I think this goes beyond us in some ways, in the sense that the institutional bodies that we work with, the ecosystem in which we operate in, including universities, the knowledge system itself, as well as other organizations like tech companies itself. There is a role that each side has to play in terms of guiding that conversation. And as I said before, this is where I think regulatory policy could potentially look at other industries where we have global norms. I was even thinking about maybe look at the aviation analogy. I mean, commercial aviation is something where all countries in general collaborate using a set of standards and a set of rules. Maybe it is far away from what artificial intelligence brings us, but it might be worth thinking about it. This is somewhere where all countries, all governments, all regulatory bodies, all commercial organizations are collaborating. Maybe that is too much to expect, for instance, where companies are looking at advancing commercial advantage. Certainly, and here I'm not talking about publishers. I think the commercial advantage that publishers like ourselves have is there, but it is not significant. Here I think we are looking at far more competitive advantage being being on the side of technology companies, for instance, and that is where that conversation is shaped. But I think all of us have a voice, and we certainly, as industry bodies and as individual publishers, we are trying to share this as much as we can with policy planners and opinion leaders, etc.
Thank you very much for a very informative talk. I wanted to follow up a little bit about your relationship with the human creators of content, or the authors, and a little bit about how you share the principles of Springer Nature with those individuals so that they're aware of how AI tools will be applied or utilized for their content, and also a bit about how you work with them to ensure that they also are following similar principles in creating the content.
Yeah. As I said before, now we are increasingly emphasizing the sort of allowed use of artificial intelligence tools, especially Gen AI tools, in the writing of the content. And this goes into our guidelines. It goes into discussions that our individual editors have with authors or with series editors who may be, for instance, responsible for a large body of work. So this is an ongoing conversation. It happens, of course, through policies that we share upfront with our stakeholders and those who are submitting manuscripts or book projects to us. But it also involves conversations, and these conversations are quite effective sometimes, because obviously the people that we are dealing with, I mean, the authors and the editors, are usually university academia. Sometimes there are industry parts also. I wouldn't say that 100% we would like it to be, but it might not be 100% foolproof, where, of course, you can say many things in a guideline, but ultimately, following that is also a responsibility of the author or the editor. This is where, of course, internal screening and things like that come in. But in a vast majority of cases, people actually follow guidelines very, very clearly, because, as I said before, I don't think anybody is really seeing that the principles of good authorship has changed. And this is what we continuously emphasize through our editors, through any kind of conversations we have with the academic community, through conversations we have with anyone who's submitting content to us. So that is one aspect of it. In terms about working with them, I mean, of course, there are various relationships that you have with the community that you work with. For instance, we work very closely with series editors who may be planning several titles with us and who are themselves inviting other experts to contribute books, etc. You might have an individual first-time author submitting a manuscript to us. I mean, there are relational differences here, but at the same time, we give we treat each with a very, very strong sense of importance and try to instill these principles. We do have these principles quite publicly displayed in our website. We actually do point them at those principles as well. And in some cases, when we are working with, say, funding bodies or specific institutions, there are also there are certain undertakings that you actually have to give. I come across that many times, in which you basically have to say, are you meeting all of these criteria? I mean, they might not all necessarily be related to generative AI use or anything, but there are policies that you need to be you need to have adopted and that you live by. So that's essentially, it's the same environment that we are doing it. We think this is very much a collaborative process. Where we share information, we try to answer questions, and we of course try to we try to align as best as we align with these principles as much as we can, quite strongly, I would say. So ongoing conversations, but I think that's quite prominently highlighted. So for authors and editors.
First of all, thank you. In the age of AI, how do you encourage young people, especially high school students, to write, or for better, to write better than AI? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, that's a question that I think about all, because I have a high school going daughter who is actually very, very tech savvy. But of course, you know, in schools, there is always regulations in schools and policies that allow what a student can or cannot use. So there is an environment of safety already created institutionally there. But as a parent, or maybe as a publisher looking at it, how can you be better than AI? At the moment, AI is trying to become as good as we are, right? I mean, in some senses, and that is basically what GenAI does. And there are, of course, agentic models, etc., which are there. But at the same time, we have not reached the point of artificial general intelligence, etc., which may have its own agency and which is able to sort of communicate in a better way. The way that I see it now is that human creativity still has an edge in terms of GenAI. Perhaps has better vocabulary, perhaps has better access to a corpus of knowledge, and it might actually even bring forth sort of outputs that seem to be better than what a human being can think about. But I do say that it is not the time for us to lose confidence in it, because as far as I've seen, all of the research work done in the world, all of the school work done in the world, I mean, even if you use it as a tool, this can help shape your language and your vocabulary to an extent, rather than just reproducing it verbatim, right? I mean, there are many things that you see. There may, of course, be instances where students unknowingly just take it and reproduce it as it is. As an institutional body, or as a teaching body, or as a publishing body, it's our job then to go in there and correct it and encourage the student to think of themselves. This will be, I'm not saying this is not going to be a challenge, but ultimately that is the direction of travel for us. And as to your question, how can we be better than AI? I still believe in human creativity. There are many things that we use AI as tools without, and the human in the loop solution is what I always point to. We have to treat it as a tool, no matter how helpful it is in terms of expediting things for us or looking more efficient, etc. Ultimately, you have to choose that decision on that basis. And there are all sorts of clues that AI-generated content is now giving, which we can use. There are also lots of mechanisms which help check those and highlight those. As much as the pull there is, I do think that clearly deployed, actually using AI, you can actually be better than what AI is. Just the same way that a transportation mechanism helps us to travel faster between 2 points if we judiciously use it and help ourselves. So that is what I tell people: use it to improve yourself, but be aware of the pitfalls. But that doesn't take away the kind of work that you still need to put in.
Okay, that's all the time we have for questions. Let's thank Anil and Scarlet for this fascinating question. Thank you.